I think we have an idea of how powerful those genetic types of tests can be. What happens in industry and in biopharma research is they tend nowadays to put one cell in a droplet and then analyze each droplet as its own test bed reactor. So this allows measurements to be done at very high throughputs. These droplets are made in microfluidic devices. One of the things we're trying to do is help optimize this process so that we get the most stable droplets that we can make. And also, as droplets become polymer particles, instead of hosting a cell in a drop, you host it in a polymer. That polymer needs to have the right softness so that the cell can live. So this is the process we want to help optimize. Currently, in order to optimize how soft a polymer particle is, you have to take one at a time and literally poke it. This is one of the other methods to measure particle softness. So we want to do this inline, on a chip, in a microfluidic device. So that's what our SPREAD project is. We've got a droplet maker, we make particles, and then inline, in flow, we measure how soft those particles are. The Spark funds, one of the things we want to do with this funding is, on top of our device, build a feedback loop. So the user of the device says, I want a particle with this specific softness property. Then the feedback loop will help the user turn the knobs on the device in the right way to get exactly what they want out of the particles that they're making. So we envision this as very much enabling in the biomedical research and pharma space, but then for future applications, there could be others, but that might be a later question. So I'll just leave it there.
So Michael, don't you have work that is kind of like similar as far as, you know, if you want to start telling us about your project, and Sarah, if you could go on mute.
I think, yeah, we have very similar projects. We are also working in nanoscale. So we are analytical chemists who are developing methods for other scientists and other, researchers to help to analyze their limited samples. We are looking for proteins, peptides, small molecules. So we do this analysis at a molecular level from the small amounts of starting material, like single cells or organelles. And you can imagine, like your mom bakes the cheesecake, and then you are trying to analyze what are the ingredients is there. But we do it in a very small scale. Yeah, and for this we developed special type of chromatography columns that are called monolithic or porous layer open tubular columns, and they differ from their commercially available competitors by the structure, by the size, and by different chemical and physical properties. And those columns allow us to operate them at specific conditions, and at the added increase in increased sensitivity, we can get more IDs, better signal to noise ratios, and so on.
Okay, thank you. Leanne, do you want to tell us about your work? And then Michael,
Yes,
if you can go on mute.
Thanks. Yeah, so my lab does a lot of sensor-enabled development of tools for health. So mostly apps, XR, we measure eye tracking, heart rate, sometimes EEG, various different things. But there was a personal situation that happened in my life a little over a year ago, where my youngest son developed type 1 diabetes. And it was a sudden thing, and we were kicked into this mode of he was now sensor enabled in order to make some good decisions. And being the scientist that I am, I read a lot about diabetes and found that young people, young adults in particular, are at really risk, because young adults make some risky decisions as part of who they are. And so this is a really labile time, and a time when they need to become independent. They need to be successful with their life choices, and particularly with their metabolic choices, in order to live long and have healthy lives with diabetes. So we proposed to make an app that is a decision support tool that brings together tools from a wearable, so that measures heart rate, accelerometry, sleep, and from the continuous glucose monitor to help by personalizing prediction of glucose variability out to like the next hour, but also giving tips and trying to gamify the things that you need to do in order to minimize that variability. So helping the teen sort of make it a little more fun and easy to do those right things, logging the food, which is a pain. Nobody wants to log every meal they eat, but it's important. And taking your insulin when you need to, and helping them learn about their own physiology. Similarly, we originally thought of this as a game, and then as we talked to more stakeholders in the community, we learned what they really want is to get their parents off their back. And so the big game is to like give information back to the parents, like thumbs up, your kid's doing really well, right? So that's the biggest motivation. That's what they want. So we're really super excited to do this. We're at the stage right now where we're looking at data that already exists to try to determine what are the most important things to collect in our own data. So we're doing user experience studies and we're collecting data hopefully over a 3-month period with this app. We got a fantastic team here at Northeastern, really interdisciplinary, and we're really hoping to work with people who are very much not like me and understand business so that we can actually put this out in the world and get people to use it and hopefully benefit from it.
Excellent, thank you. And Artie, you also are working on an app. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm an assistant professor here at Northeastern, joint with the Bouvet College of Health Sciences and the Corey College of Computer Science. And as an assistant professor, I've seen firsthand the strain that our students go through and the toll that takes on their mental health. And the pandemic has made that even worse, and now about 35% of college student-aged people report feeling depressed, with even higher rates for anxiety and other mental health conditions. So the problem is not just access to that help, but also there's a lack of quantitative tools in this space to really understand what's going on. And so we want to leverage the digital tools that we have today to help empower students to understand how they're feeling, and then also give them recommendations to help them improve their mental health. And so what we're doing is we're creating a mental health tool, an app that uses digital phenotyping and machine learning to translate a lot of the already being collected data, such as mobile device data, wearable data, to better understand mental health. So we use data like GPS location, heart rate, call and message logs, physical activity, and these features help us identify anomalies, so when something is wrong, when something is off, as well as trajectories, so what behaviors make us feel good, what make us not feel so good, and then give that information back to the student, back to the user, to help them understand what exactly they're feeling, because sometimes they'll feel like something's off, but they don't know why or what it is that they're feeling. And then also how to take small actionable steps to try to improve the way that they're feeling. And all they need to do is download the app on the phone to get started.
Excellent. Jason, how about you and your work?
Yeah. Hi. I'm based out of the Network Science Institute, where a lot of what I focus on is taking the research that we're doing and turning it into technologies that solve problems. We originally worked on this problem around doing online studies and building out a system for doing large online studies. And now we're working on our sort of second project, which is in the research literature, the challenge that we have when we do studies of anybody online is that we don't know who is a real person. This really matters when we're looking at Twitter data or Facebook data or any kind of big social network. We don't want to treat autonomous accounts or bots or inauthentic accounts as human beings. We want to study what real people are doing and what real people are exposed to and what they're talking about. And so in the lab, we worked on developing a system for identifying who is a real person, what accounts were linked to real people. As opposed to what most people do, which is identifying bots or identifying fake accounts. We went at a different direction, looked at can we identify real accounts? And we did that. And right now we're up to about 1.7 million real accounts on Twitter, X. And this helps us solve a couple of problems scientifically. You're doing research on influencers, how are people learning about COVID-19, who was exposed to misinformation during the last couple of election cycles. So we're doing great research. The question now is, how do we take this high quality social data and make it useful for practitioners? And for us, this is the sort of social listening space. Companies, governments, organizations that use social media data to figure out what are their constituents saying, what problems are they expressing or do they have, what are their opinions of different social issues or different product categories, how effective is their communication strategy, all of those things depend on social listening, being able to take in high quality social data and understand the conversation. There are a couple of challenges for us. One is 1.7 million people is a lot, but it's not the entire conversation. There are a lot of conversations that we can't necessarily get a good read on because it's just too small a part of the entire conversation. And so one of the things that we want to do is work with partners to figure out what are the kinds of questions we can ask that, where we have enough data to provide a good answer. What are the kinds of sort of limits on data collection we have that are still informative? Can we do state level summarizations, metropolitan area summarizations? This helps when we want to work with city governments versus state governments. So there's for us a lot of practical questions around the utility of the data. What can we really provide in terms of value to solving these kinds of descriptive problems in the world, what's going on. So that's where we are, looking at recruiting and working with practitioners to figure out what's the real use here. So there are opportunities for students here. A lot of the work that we're doing is just toying around with our data visualization system. So a part of what we're doing with Spark is buying access to Brandwatch, which gives us access to Twitter data, as much Twitter data as we want for the sample that we have. And our work is actually putting together interesting dashboards, doing interesting queries, figuring out what the conversation is, and interesting things about the world. So there's a lot of uses for and learning opportunities for students who want to get experience with practitioner software. And this is expensive stuff. You're not going to get it until you get into a large company or a big formal organization. So this is a great opportunity to really play around with what most practitioners are using day in, day out, in a setting where you're finding interesting things and seeing things that you wouldn't necessarily see. Just using something sort of out of the box like Hootsuite or just looking at Twitter yourself. So there's a lot of opportunities for students to play around and learn new things. As for partnerships, the perfect partner for us is somebody who has lots of different uses. So for us, we think of uses in marketing, communications, public affairs. So an organization that has teams in all of those domains who want to look at the broad spectrum of how this can be useful. That's, I think, the ideal for us. We're just asking for good feedback, interesting questions, a real sort of thermometer check on, is this something that's valuable to you? And for us, the commercial application is pretty straightforward, at least the way that it's built right now. Is what we're producing is a really high quality data filter for social listening. We're not doing new visualizations yet. We're not providing you with new data. We're providing you with cleaner, more well-grounded data that allows you to do better listening than what you have so far. So we're sort of do what's already being done, but better.
Thank you. I'm just seeing who's on my screen. So Sarah, would you be ready and to speak about these three? The student, the industry,
Sure.
and commercial? Okay.
Yeah, sure. So for student involvement, so this project that's being enabled by the Spark funds is one of the active projects in my lab. So I have a graduate student who is actively spending her dissertation time on this project. And we also have a co-op undergrad who's working on this project, and he's just started in January, but he's off to a great start. This project was started a couple years ago, and so the people who started it was one a postdoctoral fellow who's now working in industry, and we had a second undergrad co-op who was with us last semester. So I've found that the students have really done a great job contributing to this, and they've had a lot of really creative ideas about it. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with next, and hopefully bringing someone else on board. For the industry partnership and commercial applications, so our tool we see as really enabling in this microfluidic droplet making space that is currently being adopted by pharmaceutical startups and biomedical startups that are sort of more nimble than the really mature companies like Novartis, let's say. I see that as a very mature company. My contacts and my colleagues over there say that even if a particular process is slow that they're doing in the lab, if it's very well established, they're going to keep on doing it until the thing that is faster becomes equally as well established. So our basically flow process is going to enable their processes to become much faster, but they will not be the first users of it, if that makes sense. So the first users of our technology will really be more in the startup space to really demonstrate that this works. And we hope that those partners will also give us the right feedback for what the users really need, right? So like just what Jason was just saying about, how is this useful to you, the final user? That's kind of what we also need to know. What features of this tool will the person who's in the lab need it to have in order to be most helpful to them? And I feel like for me and for our project, the sort of the smaller, more nimble startups will be good partners for us. Is that answering the questions? I think those are the ones.
And that was the commercial application. I'm not sure if you covered.
Oh, yeah, I sort of touched on it. So the commercial application here is to really help optimize these formulations that pharmaceutical companies use and biomedical researchers use when they're trying to encapsulate cells or spheroids and then do testing on each one of those individually in a very high throughput way. We want to help optimize the formulation of how they make those materials to test the cells that they're testing. So that's the application is really to help in that space. The best example I have for that now is the PCR test, where they basically encapsulate cells in droplets and they then send all those cells through a flow cytometer so they can do things really high speed and high throughput. And so we're working upstream of that flow cytometer to try to optimize that formulation that comes into the flow cytometer. PCR is just one example, though. There's other sorts of assays and other sorts of tests that will be using this droplet microfluidic technology. And even down the line, things like thinking about, Leanne, you mentioned diabetes, things like thinking about diseases that have biomechanical markers, right? Like metastatic cancers get soft when they're really aggressive. Diabetes, red blood cells get stiff when they're sugar coated. So like these are all stiffness markers of health and disease. And I eventually see that our tool can help with designing assays and screening tools for diseases is my hope for this.
So student involvement, while the student is doing the work, we have two PhD students, one in chemistry, one in bioengineering. They have been working on this. They have been working on different muscular. So let me dial back a little bit. We're moving into a muscular disease space, and two diseases what we identified was Duchenne muscular dystrophy. The other is, myotonic dystrophy type 1. And Duchenne, we got started with a previous Spark Award. So the two kids have been working on that for a while. And for this new Spark Award, we wanted to move into DM1, myotonic dystrophy. So it's all entirely carried out by the two students. So the second question was the ideal partnership.
Yes.
So we wanted to, for the DMD, the Duchenne, we're entering into a contract with the pharma who wants to test this in their own hands. So that's happening. We're going to have a meeting in a couple of weeks. We're also finishing the license agreement with Northeastern. So everything will be on solid legal grounds. With DM1, we're trying to do some business development here. We have engaged with a few potential shoppers for this technology, and there's a few more to go on the market. I think Sanofi and Vertex are definitely interested in this field. They published publicly stated interest in this disease. And another company, Takeda, we just met a couple of weeks ago. They said from the Japan group. Interestingly, the Takeda, they put the neuromuscular disease back in Japan. So we had a phone call with the scientists there. It feels like they wanted to test this in their own hands too. So we'll see if that morphs into a contract at some point. But yeah, so I think partnership with large pharma is the way to go. There will be eventually the party that will pay for our technology. But before that, we might need to engage with VC to take this a bit further than we can do with a Spark Fund. And the third, what was the third question?
Commercial application.
Commercial application. That's the DM1. DM1 is a rare muscular disease. It's actually not so rare disease. About 1 in 2,000 to 8,000 people by different estimates. So this is quite common for a rare disease, and the patients cannot relax their muscle once they're contracted. Animal models are readily available, so you can just buy them and test it very easily in the lab. The clinical trial is relatively quick, so once you produce enough materials and recruit the patients, you can complete phase 1/2 study within 1 year. So that's a really short clinical trial. So that's very appealing to people in my space, which is the companies developing oligonucleotide therapeutics. But we think we have the potential to be best in class. There's no drug in the market, so that's kind of our appeal. Trying to get into this market, maybe not as first, but as the best, because there's a couple of companies at least 5 years ahead of us trying to develop this therapeutics.
Thank you. So I know you weren't here at the beginning. If you could put your microphone on mute, then the next person that speaks will go on the big screen. So I can see Michael on my screen. So if you can address these questions of student, industry, and commercial.
Yeah, sure. So currently we are a two-man show. So it's myself and my PI, Professor Alexander Ivanov, and we are, hardcore analytical chemists or scientists. And we like the experience in, like, for example, business strategy, market research, or we are also looking for some mechanical or electrical engineers. So we are open for new students to join our team to work towards our goals. And, those students can gain an experience in the research field that will benefit their CVs, right? So having like the business background plus something with the scientific background will definitely help to boost their chance to get, the job in the different companies also when they graduate. The second was the industry partnership, right? So at this point, it would be good to see our technology being used in both industrial and academical settings, and this technology be robust and reliable in their applications. For the ideal partner, having the access to their pressures, limited samples would be also nice. And then the commercial application, that was the last question. So this tool or the technology that we are developing can be used anywhere where the scientists try to analyze proteins, peptides, post-translational modifications, protein-protein interactions in small amount limited pressures biological samples. And for example, those samples can be circulating tumor cells, microneedle biopsies, small volume liquid biopsies, single cells, or organelles.
So I had the pleasure of hearing you speak at Katie's, community event. And as I believe I heard you say, instead of having to take a whole vial of blood, you guys could literally do a pinprick and get the same results. Is that what I heard correctly?
Yes, yes.
Kind of.
So we are opening the possibility to analyze smaller amounts of biological samples and still get comparable or better results.
Excellent. Okay, Artie, do you want to hit the student, industry, and commercial, please?
Yeah, sure. So our tool is very student-centric. It is being created by students for students. I have students in my lab working on projects on digital phenotyping for mental health, and it's their publications and research that really make the foundation of this idea and bring the scientific rigor to it. Our pilot study will be run on a cohort of undergraduate students, and so we have been talking with multiple student groups at Northeastern about launching a pilot study with them, and we will soon have a waitlist up and running so students who are interested in testing the app can sign up. So whether students are engaging in the back end or the front end of the tool, they'll be making an impact on the efficacy of this tool to improve the mental health of students. And we're always looking for more students to help join our team with the right skills to bring this idea to life. We absolutely want to partner with academic institutions to bring this tool to their students as part of their wellness services, which will increase their access to care and make it much more widespread. We also see our tool as a way to connect students to actual in-person help through industry partnerships with other mental health programs that have access to healthcare professionals, such as community health workers or therapists, so that when we do find those anomalies, there is help available on demand. So there's definitely room for industry partnerships there. Our hope is that our tool will become a crucial part of university wellness programs and that the tool will empower students to understand their own mental health and engage in activities that will improve their mental health, their how to engage in different activities and how to increase that access to care so students know that they're not alone. So that's really our commercial application. So once we're ready, we'd love to launch this as a tool for incoming freshmen to a university.
Okay, great. So Leanne, you're next.
Great, thanks. So we have the pleasure of working with 4 students currently on this project. One of the things that I'm really excited about that Northeastern does is really foster interdisciplinary collaborations, and that's what we do in my lab, and that is very much what's going on in this project. So we've got a student in human movement and rehab sciences who's the lead, Sundar, and then we have another PhD student who became interested, who is actually a nurse practitioner practicing in behavioral psychology out in the community, but she's pursuing her PhD in nursing. And so she had prior experience with the sort of behavioral health, psychological side of diabetes, and she wanted to be involved. We have 2 students who are master's students in software engineering and data analytics engineering, working on both the app and the machine learning aspects of the project. So together, it's really a wonderful little collaboration because there's a lot of learning that goes on between these students who have separate skill sets. So that's definitely the student involvement is key. Potential for industry partnership. We have multiple industry partners that we're seeking right now. I'm looking for a partnership with the right kind of wearable platform. I've been pursuing Whoop. They're far more interested in sports performance, but we're trying to hook them in there too. So, but then health, but we actually our software engineering student was able to do what we needed to do probably without their help, but it would be better to have a partner. But we're looking at the platforms, the companies that make the sensors, and then there are other companies that are sort of above that sort of sell services that are wrappers around the platform. So Dexcom is the continuous glucose monitor that we use right now, but there are multiple. So any of those companies would be great partners. But then there are these companies on top of, like Signos is sort of a health promotion company that's trying to use glucose data from a CGM to promote wellness. And they're sort of slowly moving into diabetes, but they're not working yet in pediatrics and they're not doing anything gamified. I have spoken with them. They're interested in something like this. But I think that's a dimension where to go. So it's just really understanding more about the business cases and the alignment between what they want and what we want. In terms of commercial applications, the way I think about this, I'd previously been, long ago, I'd been a program officer at Autism Speaks, running a unique science initiative, but they had this great tool called the 100-Day Kit for newly diagnosed families. And it was awesome because no matter what age you were when you were diagnosed, there was this thing. It was a guide. And I would really love to see what we're developing as something like that for families with adolescents to young adults, whether you're newly diagnosed yourself or a family who maybe has had a child who was diagnosed at 2 or 5, but they're now in this phase where they're looking to be independent, and you'd better be looking to help them get independent because they're going to be making some choices, on their own. And so how do you navigate this? So we see it as a navigation tool for families in this space. So there, I think I'd like to see the commercialization sort of aligning with a health system that sees a lot of families with diabetes, so that this could really be shared with them at a critical time in their care path. So I've previously been a founder of another company, and I learned that it's really important to remind yourself of what you don't know. And I know nothing about business, like zero, nada. So I actually felt very comfortable leaning into that when they're asking me these questions, like, hey, I asked my people who I know who do know something about that, and that actually was great because they're like, cool. So I felt that the judges were not expecting me to, be the person who knows everything, which is good because I can't be that person. So they also were challenging us really to think about the fact that, I'm personally motivated in looking at the literature around type 1, which is important, impactful. It's a lifelong disorder, but recognizing that the numbers are far more voluminous with type 2. So that has actually really changed our path. So in talking with someone who does do commercialization and gamification has really changed our focus, because we really want to make sure that this app doesn't need like a wholesale redo if we want to help people with type 2, because the fundamentals are there that it could very well, but you don't want to start making like a kiddie game app and then it's like completely useless for adults who are living with type 2. So that's been very helpful. What would the world look like once your solution is implemented? What new opportunities will it create? So I feel so fortunate to be at Northeastern because there's such an amazing community of researchers here who are already like offering their ideas. So I'm part of a design group in CAMD, and there's a relatively new professor named Laura Fulano who I didn't know about when I pitched this grant, but she's helping out, and she herself lives with type 1 and wrote a book called Cyborg, because she sees herself as a cyborg. It's like having to rely on all of these tools, but she is connected with designers who also have type 1. And so we're going to get to pitch our idea to her T1 designers group. And this to me is what I think it should be like. So not only is this going like, it's a tool that goes out to the community, but it's also collecting information. Like, you have to live with these devices. They're actually helping you make decisions on a daily basis. What do you want to feed back that would actually make your life better? Because we want to know, right? So how could we actually collect that and make an ecosystem out of it? So that I think is an opportunity, because these apps are able to collect information and go both ways. So lastly, tips or advice for future Spark Fund applicants. I would say that this is such a fantastic opportunity for some, for an idea that you've been gestating, that's like, just maybe you want to take a shot, that not ready for perhaps NIH funding or a larger NSF grant, but for something that you really want to try to do, but it's a little too risky to take a shot. I think that's it's something that I hope more people consider doing, because it's a wonderful opportunity and there's a lot of support wrapped around it.
Michael, would you mind going next? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So the first question, how did engagement partners and their thinking? So usually SparkFire judges are not subject matter experts, and they see the project from more of the business side. So they help us to polish our proposal so the general audience can understand the impact and the science of our project. Also, as we know, research labs have many multiple research directions, so it also helps us to shape the application towards one specific research direction. With the second question, what will the world look like once your solution is implemented? Well, here I have to say that we are not Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos story, right? We offer the possibility to other scientists to analyze scarce, precious, and limited samples, and allows them to obtain more information compared to commercially available products. So it's like the nanoscale magnifying glass for them. And then we think that it will have the impact also on general population, for example, for patients and the healthcare system, because if you can analyze smaller amounts of sample, the patients, there is no need for hospitalization, there is no need for travel. Some samples can be shipped as, for example, dry blood spot to the hospital or to the laboratories. So it's also decrease the pain, and so on. And the tips for the Spark Fund applicants, future Spark applicants, well, we submitted the Spark Fund several times, I think 4 or 5 times, and so be persistent, and you might get lucky sometimes. I also think that Northeastern University offers the variety of possibilities to boost and help your application. For example, the IDEA, student organization, or the NSF ICOPS Northeastern, that is led by Professor Mark Meyer. They help with the market research and so on. So use those tools to help out, and I'm sure you will be successful at some point.
Thank you very much. Artie, how about you?
Awesome. So speaking with the Spark Fund judges really allowed us to understand and think about the obstacles that we would encounter when we go to market. So getting a customer is one thing, but then how do you keep one, especially with a mental health app where we're trying to engage in behavior change? So they also made us think about, what are the other possible revenue avenues that we can pursue with our IP while we work on customer acquisition. And so their advice and questions gave us a lot of ideas and prepared us to strategically pivot as needed as we move towards getting our first customer. In terms of what will the world look like once our solution is implemented and what new opportunities it will create, our vision is that in the same way that we check in on our step count, we will also check in on our mental health. We now know that mental health is as important as physical health. So this is so important, but in the same way that getting 10,000 steps a day is sort of an arbitrary goal, we don't want to do that for mental health. We want to personalize it. And so that's where our app comes in. And we hope that our app will be on the App Store and easy to download, ready to use. Our tips for future Spark Fund applicants is once you have a solid foundation on this research idea, you have that research-backed understanding of the actual problem, you need a vision of what is the solution. What are you going to change? And then just tying that together with sort of a user-centric approach, thinking about what can you actually create that people can use and engage with that research. I think that's basically what will get you to the solid idea.
Thank you. How about Jason?
Yeah, I'll put the first and last question in the same bucket, as we talk about, we went back and forth with Spark, and one of the, like we call this is our fourth application to Spark. And each one was an iteration, and over basically the 2 years where we were applying to Spark, we were working on the project, and it changed and evolved over that time. So no going in that it's going to, these projects take a long time. I think we're all accustomed to long-term projects. Nothing's quick. And so, Spark in some ways is a sounding board. It's a chance to, shape your research idea in for a certain audience, for a certain, area of application. And every time you get feedback, it's a chance to, and very much like getting reviews and article reviews. It's a chance to, see how somebody else is reading your work, how somebody responds to it, and for you to improve on the way that you present it, or the way that you are thinking about the challenges that you're expecting, or the problem that you actually solve. So I think my recommendation for Spark Fund folks is to look at applicants, is to look at this as an ongoing conversation, not as a one-off grant, really. And this really falls into sort of our experience over time with the multiple ways of application. One of the things that we I think kept getting sort of feedback on was privacy. How are we going to keep our participants' data private? And for us, the way we were sort of originally framing this was, we're going to give you access to real people's data. These are real people. You want to have their data. You want to have bot data. But really, we're not providing real people's data. We don't want to provide real people's data for the privacy reasons mentioned. And that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're providing you with the aggregation of authentic accounts. So we're not going to tell you that this is John Smith, right? We're just going to tell you that this keyword is counted on, a sample of 1.7 million real people. And so just changing the way that we talk about and think about what's the value that we're adding, helped us, sort of get out of some of these the criticism of the privacy implications of our work. Another thing for us that was really valuable with Spark was, every time we would go through the Spark application process, it helped us clarify what we really needed to do. So what is our, a lot of people think of this as sort of our MVP, but it's more of a, what do we really need to do in the next 6 months to a year? And how do we simplify and focus on the most important thing? The most recent version of our application, we were planning to build our own data visualization system. And that's what a lot of the money was for hiring a student to build our own data visualization stuff, and to spend that time, doing scientific studies on like what are the kinds of visualizations we could do. And the feedback that we got was, what you really need most of all is feedback from users. Like, what do people actually want? What are the things that's most important to them? And that's where we switched our focus. And I think that what's made us successful this time around was, we're not still doing research in the open-ended broad sense. Like, we want to talk to customers first, talk to users first, and see what's the real value. And once we know where the value really lies, then we can start developing new visualizations, or going to market with what we have now. So that's how our project has sort of evolved with Spark Fund. So what's the world look like once this is done? Right now, I think a lot of journalism, politics, marketing is trend-based. People want to pick up on what everybody's talking about so that they can sort of push their messages or respond to issues. And a lot of that, well, I mean, that's sort of a part of the game of being a part of the conversation. These conversations are very noisy, and they're very noise-driven, and they're driven by people who, can sort of amplify themselves, whether they actually have influence or not. And so what we're looking for here is a real honest signal on what normal people are talking about, as opposed to what sort of the loudest people are talking about, or the people who have the ability to pay for big bot armies to sort of prop up their messages. So we're hoping for a more honest, transparent, and reflective conversation, and ability to capture that and engage in that.
That would be really nice. Okay, Sarah, if you could fill us in.
Sure. So I will start with the second question. What will the world look like? And then I'll talk about the Spark Fund. So our immediate goal is to help optimize formulations for biomedical and pharmaceutical testing. Right? So we envision that our workflows could potentially speed things up from the way things are currently done by a factor of 10 or a factor of 100 or even more than that, right? So a workflow that might take a week now, we might be able to get it down to an hour. That would really be phenomenal, right? That's kind of where our goal is. We're not yet there to implement everything into actuality, but that's where we're heading. And one of the other things that I had mentioned was I would really like to see the tools that we're making make their way into the space of disease screening, if not necessarily complete diagnostics, right? At least some screening tools. Like, again, I have to go back to Leanne, who was talking about diabetes and the fact that there's large numbers of people with type 2 diabetes. And actually, one of the staggering statistics is that, most of them, I've seen numbers like 3/4 of them or 50% of them don't even know they have it. And so we need some better tools to just do some type of quantitative screening, even if it's not going to the doctor's office and getting the gold standard blood test. And the other end of the spectrum is just taking surveys about your sort of health history. So there's lots of space in the middle there. So I envision some of our tools going in that direction, thinking about screening for some of these diseases. That's my hope. That's my hope for where our projects go. The Spark Fund judges and everyone at the CRI has been really helpful. Myself, like other people on this call, I don't have business background. I didn't know anything about, intellectual property, how to pursue a patent. I didn't really know any of those things. And I still can't claim to know too much about all of the behind the scenes processing. So the people at the CRI and the Spark Fund judges have really helped me to think about, what comes next and how do we think about making our idea reality. And so after putting in our disclosure to the CRI and they deciding to pursue a patent and then helping us connect with the right legal team to put the right words in place on the page, that was something, having read the document that the lawyers put together, I could not have done this, right? This is their job. We have the right people. Northeastern's able to connect us to the right people to help us actually do these things. And then also the networking. I feel like the judges on the call, even if they're not domain experts, I feel like part of the thing that the Spark team does and the CRI does is to help us talk to the right people. And again, just echoing what other people have said, we need to know what our eventual users' needs are, right? We need to know what they're going to use. We need to know what's going to work for them. And that means talking to the right people. And I found that there's a couple of conversations that I've had with certain individuals that one conversation just saved me so much time and effort trying to dig something up and trying to find something out on my own. So I find that the Spark Fund judges and really everyone at the CRI has really had this sort of shepherding help for me in particular, just pointing me in the right directions, helping me connect with the right people, helping me find the right experts and the right resources. And it's been really phenomenal. I'm really grateful for all of that support. Oh, tips. Sorry, I missed the last one. Yeah. So again, just to echo what other people have said, I think take advantage of the fact that it is a conversation that you're having with people at the CRI and people at the Spark Fund, and just take advantage of staying in touch with them at all the checkpoints. Before you send in your application, as you get your funding, to keep that lines of communication open and just make sure you're keeping in touch. And someone else said this, I forget who said this previously, but yeah, just go for it. Like if you have an idea, they will help you shape it and put it together into a package that is more realistic than you might have thought. And I think that's one of the other strengths of this group. So yeah, so thank you.
Thank you. Ka, can you bring us home?
Hey, so first question, judges' feedback. It was very helpful. The first time we got quite a few questions that we haven't thought of. That was December 2022, so a couple of years ago. And the second time we got only one question because the first time kind of prepared us on what kind of questions to expect. So we sort of preempted in the slides. So we only got one question. So the judges' feedback definitely helped us, prepare better. I think this whole exercise is very, very exciting, very, very interesting to me personally. I started working on sort of translation of my laboratory technology around the same time we got the first Spark Award. Since then, we participated in Mark Meyer's class, the NSF I-Core site program. It was very helpful. He actually introduced me to Sharon Tan, who was turned out to be involved with a VC that's looking into our program these days. So, very interesting, very good connections that we got from these programs. Also, Mark introduced me to one of the judges on the panel, Vincent Ling. And Vincent was a BD person at Takeda, so he was sort of presiding that meeting with the Japan team a couple of weeks ago. So the judges are actually personally helping us, in moving our ideas forward. So yeah, I think this whole exercise is very beneficial for us. Second question is how will the word look like? So yeah, ideally we'll be envisioning a world without people dying from DMD and DM1. That's the ideal. The patients are now getting weekly injections, 8 grams of the material, short infusion, only to boost their dystrophin level from 0% to 0.8% after 180 weeks of weekly infusion. So the patients don't live, very, very long. And, they have disease manifestations very early in their development, like 2 years old, they begin to not be able to walk. By the time they died, they couldn't breathe, they couldn't talk. So very devastating disease. So ideally, we'll fix that, at least to some degree, right? So that's the vision. What tips, advice, future Spark applicants? It's a very good mechanism, right, to get your ideas tested. I think everyone involved, Katie, Wabhav, PJ, really helpful. The first Spark Fund really got us into the muscular space. I was working in the cancer space, never think about muscle. So, when the award came out, we began to look into possibility to branch out. And I think this is a really good move for me. It really made my day job more exciting as a professor, because, coming to the lab, we think initially it's just publishing papers, right? Nobody reads, but we have a real shot at taking this all the way to the patients. I think that makes me coming to the lab, equivalent to having fun, right? This is so much more interesting than just publishing papers. Yeah, so I think one of the other awardee from last year, Mansoor, had a quote. He says, "My biggest regret in my life is curing hundreds of mice, not a single human." Right. So to avoid that regret, I think this is the way to go. And this entrepreneurship approach, Northeastern, first of all, is being very supportive of that, which is great. The other is you're really exposed to a different world of operation of thinking that really helped us, I think, in terms of choosing our next project to work on. What could actually make sense, what is not a good idea to even waste money to test. So I think this whole exercise has been tremendously beneficial for me. So the advice to the future applicants is to apply.